Okay, welcome back, y'all. This is going to be Unit 1, Lecture 3, Chapter 3, Comparative Approaches to the Study of Public Policy by Sophie Schmidt, who's a pretty famous researcher. Section 3.1, Introduction. What is comparative public policy analysis? So there are many different strands of public policy analysis. So here are some topics, right? Who are the actors? Who are they? What do they think? What are their backgrounds? What are the relationships between them? And who is more important at each step, right? Those 5 steps we talked about. Okay, next, institutions. This is sort of my stuff. What are the rules? What are the constraints? Where are the veto points? And how many are there? Who are sitting at those veto points, etc.? There are also institutional battles for the definition of what policy means or policy outcomes means, right? There are battles between institutions for control of particular policies or jurisdictions of particular policies, and for control over which institution implements those policies, right? And there are obviously battles over resources, over budgets. There are concerns from many political scientists and economists about trying to, annually ramp up your budget and throwing money at things that don't need it just to show the budget makers like we're spending this money and need more, that kind of stuff. Okay, next, international institutional constraints, right? From an international perspective. So this is going to include things like the World Health Organization, right? The World Trade Organization, the IMF, the World Bank, the Geneva Conventions on War and Humanitarian Rights, the UN institutions, right? There are one of these chapters is dedicated to this international perspective, but this is kind of a new and growing realm if you're interested. Another one, programs, right? Yes or no? Do we even try to fix this problem? How do we fix this problem? What kind of resources do we have to throw at it? Is this nominal change or real change? We talked about that a bit above. Most of what we see is this sort of tinkering around the margins. And what are the control mechanisms that we use, right? Are we using policing? Are we taxing? Are we, you know, um, indirectly supporting things like education? There are a lot of different approaches, right? All right, next, the decision making process itself, right? Does the public get input and at what points and how much power do they have in their input? Who are the actors and what is their background? This kind of touches on the actors thing I talked about earlier. What are the institutional constraints in the actual decision making process? And this is more of an overarching, like, what does your government look like? Are you parliamentary? Are you federalist? Are you checks and balances like the United States? Like, there's lots of different approaches to policymaking if you're in London, where you have a parliamentarist system and there are few checks and balances, versus if you are in federalist checks and balances, tripartite governance America, right? Okay, enough on that. Section 3.2, Varieties of Comparative Public Policy Research, Policies, Patterns, Processes. So they break down a couple of dimensions by which we can think about analyzing policy, that stuff. So dimension 1 is just comparing public policies themselves, right? Impact studies. What are the policy's effects on the targets of the regulation, right? Outcome studies. What are the immediate consequences of a policy decision more broadly, not just the targets, right? Society in general or the economy in general, whatever it might be. Um, and then C, outputs, right? They study the actual content of a decision. They'll do literal, textual analyses, and they're interested in, what are the key words that are being used? What is the philosophy? What is like the textual length, all of these sorts of things. Okay, the second dimension offered is comparing patterns of public policy making, right? So, what is the direction ideologically or the range of a policy change, right? Or policy changes under a particular administration or international comparisons, these sorts of things, right? The second is diffusion, right? This is again a new and sort of growing branch. And diffusion is just the idea that these policies eventually wend their way to other geographic localities, whether it be between the states, cities, municipalities, international organizations, etc., right? And this is important because we know that there's sort of a feedback loop, which makes this very interesting, especially from an econometrics modeling perspective that doesn't do that well, is that lawmakers learn from successful and failed policies, right? We have this term in America, the laboratories of democracy, right? The 50 different states. So you can have 50 different approaches to solving a social ill. And many will fail and some will succeed. And then we will learn about how those successes worked and implement them into our system and try to improve from there, right? So diffusion starts to happen. Um, let's see. And then we have policy convergence. It's kind of related to the above, but it's more based on sort of a temporality. How does this work over time? And so a good example of this would be sort of the argument that some proffer that there's a race to the bottom from a tax perspective in the southern states in the United States, right, where they're reducing taxes on major corporations to draw in factories and create jobs, things like that. But there's an argument, right? If you're offering, say, Toyota in San Antonio free land, public access, access to public finances to build out things like electrical infrastructure, dams, roads to your factory, things of this sort, and you're not taxing this entity, then the ones who are paying the brunt of this are the taxpayers, not the corporation who got all these handouts, right? And so some political scientists and economists call this the race to the bottom. Um, and we're finding the southern states are constantly competing to hand out giveaways to major corporations so that they can make these claims about jobs, et cetera, right? Okay. Section 3.3, comparing processes of public policy making, right? And so this is where institutional arguments are often found, right? There are lots of institutional constraints that we talked about above. But the big one that I want to focus on just here, right, and I'll let y'all read the rest of it, are veto points, right? And veto points are incredibly critical to political science and that game theoretical modeling I was talking about earlier, where individual or collective decision makers whose agreement is required for the change of the status quo, right? So these are individuals or organizations where if they cancel it, if they say no, it's done, no matter how many veto points it's gotten to from here, right? And there are a lot of them, right? So the rules committee is very important. They establish whether how we will debate these things, how much time, or whether a subcommittee can even consider a policy proposal. You have the subcommittees. It's got to get passed through there. Then it's got to get past the committee itself. Then it's got to go to the floor vote, right? And we're just talking about, let's say it started in the House. Then it's got to go, if the House passes it, to the Senate. They've got to pass it. It's got to get through the filibuster rules. Then, if there have been amendments, it's got to go to a joint committee between the House and the Senate. It's got to pass there. Then it's got to go back and pass both votes. You got to worry about funding, right? So that means the appropriations committee is going to get involved. You've got to get the president's signature, You also generally are going to need the approval of powerful NGOs and outside actors like non governmental organizations, donors, unions. So there are a lot of veto points in the United States system. Um, and again, I would point to like parliamentarism that has far fewer veto points, right? Whether that's good or bad is a debate, but these veto points are everywhere in American politics. Okay. Section 3.4 Research Methods and Causal Explanations in Comparative Public Policy. So there are a couple of different ways of looking at this. If you've taken the sort of data methodology course, you should know this stuff. But we have not only the level of analysis like micro, meso, macro, we also have quantitative versus qualitative data, right? So quantitative is data driven. It's generally got a dependent variable, independent variable, controls. You've got to have definitions for how you operationalize these things, etc. Then you have the qualitative side, which tends to, it's often called thick description, and it's generally based on case studies, right? So very different approaches. Both are useful, but we should just know about them. Okay, thank you so much. That's the end of lecture 3, and I'll get the next one up ASAP. Have a great night.